All right. Dana White Contender Series Week 2 is in the books, Dominic. 5 more winners,
Mm.
5 more contracts.
Mm.
Overall, top to bottom, how was the card this week? Was it a step up from last week in terms of the quality that we got, you would say?
I would say so. We have 3 first-round finishes on this card, 2 fights that went the distance and were pretty good. The featured bout, main event, whatever you want to call it, was very good, back and forth striking. And then the other one that went the distance was an absolute just grapple fest. I was
Mm.
exhausted after watching that fight. So I'd say all in all, a better week, but still, regardless of what the fights were, all 5 winners get a contract. So back-to-back, 10 for 10, perfect so far through 2 weeks. What are your thoughts on that?
Harder to nitpick this week, I would
Mm-hmm.
say. We'll definitely get into that, but I said my piece last week, and I tried to say that like once per season, and then I kind of just
Yeah.
enjoy the ride because really, when you think about it, if they just simply advertise the show as like whoever wins this fight gets a contract,
Mm-hmm.
it's still a pretty compelling show.
For sure. Yeah.
It's just the fact that you go in thinking that like these guys have to earn it, like
Yeah.
not just win, but they need to do it in style.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like that's not really the case anymore. It sort of makes it disappointing, but really, it's still my favorite show to watch on
Yeah.
television. So
Yeah,
I
for
mean,
sure.
it's all nitpicks at the end of the day. But yeah, we'll start at the bottom here. Start with our first fight of the night, where Charalampos Grigoriou. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. There's a
Yeah.
couple names on here tonight that were tough. He gets the first round, first minute TKO over Cameron Smotherman. What a name there, too. Uh, this one was pretty quick, pretty emphatic finish there. Really landed a good clean shot that dropped Smotherman, and then he swarmed him for the ground and pound, and that was it. Dominic, first fight of the night. What'd you think of Charalampos Grigoriou?
For one, that's a pretty outstanding, phenomenal name, but that's quite a way to get a card started. A first round, first minute finish. The straight right that he brought down the middle was beautiful. The ground and pound was absolutely vicious. I don't blame the ref for stepping in when he did. I thought it was a fine stoppage. That's quite a way to set the tone, I feel like, for a card. On a show like this, when you are the first fight of the night, you do set the standard, and when there's only 5 others to follow or 4 others to follow you, it sets a precedent, and that's what I felt this was. It was like a stamp. He's now 8-3, 6 knockouts in a UFC contract.
In theory, this is an uphill battle for these two guys. They were both
Mm.
like 7-3 coming in.
Mm-hmm.
You would feel like in if this were kind of the show that we all think it should be, that these guys may have to really put in quite a performance to get that contract, just because a little less experience, they a little more mixed bag in terms of results.
Mm-hmm.
I know Dana. I'm still not sure exactly how much information Dana's given before the fights. He claims that he pretty much comes in with no knowledge of these guys at all, but then he does know betting odds and stuff for them. So I don't know. But yeah, there's really nothing you can say here. It's very clean, just a
Yeah.
1 minute finish. Definitely deserving of a contract, in my opinion. What division was this? Was this bantamweight or were they
It was
bigger?
bantamweight. Yep.
Yeah, so bantamweight, obviously a very stacked division, but Charalampos Grigoriou, your newest member of that division. I'm excited to see what's next for him. Following that, another clean showing, I feel like. Round one, 4 minutes even. I like that. I like the first two fights ending in that
Yeah.
even mark there. This was women's strawweight.
Strawweight. Mm-hmm.
Eduarda Moura gets the 4 minute submission over this is deceivingly a hard name.
Yes. Yeah.
Janaina Silva.
Mm.
And this, I know in MMA you're constantly taught that like size doesn't matter. You're taught that a lot. Hoist Gracie, that's how the
Mm-hmm.
whole sport in terms of America was sort of founded on those principles of the smaller guy can win because technique, positioning, that's really what matters.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes, Dominic, you get someone like Eduarda Moura, and the size is just too much.
Yeah.
She's like 5'6", going up against Silva was like 5'1" here.
Mm-hmm.
Just bullied her for those four
Yes.
minutes. I mean, it was very
Dominant.
clean,
Yeah.
just dominant, had her on the ground. dominant control, found that submission, was very patient. But to get that finish and to look like she did, Dana seemed very impressed. Said like he doesn't even look at her as like a contender.
Yeah.
Like he looks at her like she could fight anybody in the division right now. So high praise from Dana. Did you feel the same way?
That is definitely high praise, but I had her at number 1 on my power rankings for the week. I loved this performance. This was a battle of 2 undefeated fighters coming in, 8-0 versus 5-0, and Eduarda made it look easy. I mean, this was utter dominance for 4 straight minutes. The takedown happened so seamlessly and flawlessly, got her down, good ground and pound, and then gets a submission finish. It looks like she's someone that can do it all. 8 of her 9 wins are by finish. I love that 115 is starting to get a couple more new wrinkles into their division right now, and this is going to be a very fun addition. And with those types of phrases that Dana's throwing around for her, maybe it won't be too long before she's fighting someone with a number next to their name. You never know.
That's a very good point. And having that kind of size advantage,
Mm-hmm.
you definitely see it sometimes in women's MMA, but I don't feel like you see it near as much as you do on the men's side. Like I
Yeah.
feel like obviously there's less women's divisions, but you feel like that could really prove to be a very serious advantage for one of these women that potentially is, I'm not trying to advocate for heavy weight cuts, but in theory,
Mm.
if someone's cutting down from, I don't know, 145, someone who maybe is a more natural like 145 or is able to cut down to 115, that's a huge difference in
Oh,
women's
yeah.
MMA.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure what Eduarda is walking around at, but she's got to be pretty close to like 135, something like
She could be a
that. So,
flyweight, I'd imagine. Yeah.
so I think that she might be able to even be a bantamweight. Like she really has a large figure, just like
Mm-hmm.
a tall and wide. So yeah, I the way Dana talked her up too, that's those kind of talking, those little selling points there,
Mm.
that's gonna stick with her as she makes her debut. Whether we all have our gripes with Dana at times and maybe with things on this show, but those B Joe Pfeiffer kind of sound bites, those are the things that carry on to when they make their debuts. I could see the same thing happening to her where it's like she's not really a contender, she can fight anybody in this weight class. And if she goes in and proves it and wins in her debut, it's just going to keep building like a snowball as we move into the dog days of Winterdom.
Mm-hmm. And I want to ask you, with something like that, with a couple of these contender series prospects that get Dana talking like that, does that add more pressure to them? It's already pressure enough. I feel like you come off the contender, you have this kind of label on you, right? But then when you have that alongside of the Joe Pfeiffer moment or a moment like this where Dana's praising Eduarda here, do you feel like that adds any more pressure to them, or it's still same old, same old? They're debuting in the UFC at the end of the day.
I mean, I don't see how you can say it doesn't add more pressure.
Mm,
It's just a matter of the person on if it truly affects them or not.
mm-hmm.
There's obviously different levels of mental fortitude and maybe different levels of buying into your own hype that you'll see among the athletes of the sport.
Sure.
So I don't think you can answer with a straight face that it doesn't add more pressure, but it's just does that pressure actually affect the
Yeah.
individual? That's
Well
that. Do
said.
they really are they really able to feel it?
Mm-hmm.
So with someone like Eduarda, time will tell. But
Hmm.
Joe Pfeiffer obviously had a lot on him to live
Yeah.
up to,
He's
and
done pretty good.
he seemed to handle it in stride. And if anything, I wonder if that sort of made him better.
Yeah. Good point.
The next fight, Dominic, this is probably the one that was the most controversial in
Mm.
terms of the contract being awarded. What weight class was this in? Remind me. This is featherweight.
Featherweight.
Yeah. So Hyder Amil ends up getting a unanimous decision win over Emrah Sonmez.
Toughies today.
Sonmez. Yeah, this is just I should have prepped the names before I wrote all these names down, and yet here I am still struggling. But Hyder Amil ends up getting a unanimous decision win in a fight that was
Mm.
exhausting to watch.
Yeah.
I think that's probably the most common thing you'll hear said about this fight. Dana seemed to love the fight. He said he thought both guys had nothing left, and they kept pushing and pushing and pushing, and really didn't let their foot off the gas as to not make it a less than exciting fight. And I do agree to a certain extent. Like it was impressive that like you could tell after round 2, these guys basically had nothing left,
Mm-hmm.
and they still just kept going. But let's be honest. I mean, this didn't look very pretty here, especially
Mm.
in that last round. It got pretty ugly. Now, I'm not saying that should necessarily disqualify someone from getting a contract, but I guess I'll ask you to kind of get started. Did Hyder Amil do enough in your eyes to secure that UFC contract?
I would say no. I feel like this would be the one that I wouldn't have done for this week. And it's not even like, I don't know, it's not like he had a bad performance, but it's the type of matchup that was presented here where he had no choice but to constantly fend off takedowns. I believe at one point in the third round, he was 14 of 17 on defending takedowns, and that was before the fight was over. So it probably got upwards near of 20 by the time all 15 minutes had kind of finished up. And so with that, I feel like, he did great defensively, but we didn't really get to see much of him offensively. He did decent on ground and pound when he would flip the transitions, but then would get flipped back and he was back on the defensive side. So if anything, I feel like it was one of those performances where he could have earned maybe a second fight in the season, or he comes back next season. Kind of one of those where he's on the radar because now you're like, okay, we saw him in this type of matchup. What can he do in a matchup with a striker or someone that's not going to grapple as much as Emrah did here? So that's kind of where I was viewing this fight. It was a valiant effort, but I feel like it's hard to do a contract based off of what we got to see in this fight.
Yeah, so Hyder Amil was a name that I instantly was like, I feel like I recognize this name. And that's because he fought for Bellator actually a couple times. So he's got some pretty high level experience relative to the rest of these guys on this card. And I think the story for him is the same in every fight. It's he thrives in these kind of fights, these
Yeah.
dog fights, just outwilling, outlasting, just giving just an inch more than his opponent. He might have benefited a little bit from Emrah missing weight. He was the only fighter
Yeah, I
on the
saw
card
that.
that missed weight. So maybe had a tough weight cut. Obviously, he's a wrestle heavy fighter. Wrestling is the most exhausting thing you can
Mm-hmm.
do in MMA. So if you're already kind of feeling pretty bad after that weight cut, it's just going to get worse. And I think ultimately, like round 3 was like his perfect scenario where it was just the ugliest fight. And he, being a guy that's not the one trying to initiate the grappling, was able to benefit from being able to fend off a ton of takedowns very easily and just kind of pick shots with a drained opponent who's basically sitting in, with his knees on the ground, just having a hard time even getting up.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
I personally probably would not have given him a contract, but the fight was exciting. It's hard. You can't deny that he didn't show a lot of heart,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't really look at Hyder Amil and think, just from what I've seen from him in the past and then what we saw here,
Mm-hmm.
the story's the same. It's like if he goes up against a guy who has more of a gas tank here and has some discernible fight IQ, I think he's going to get washed out.
Yeah.
That's truthfully how I
Yeah.
feel. So probably wouldn't have given him the contract, but I could understand why if Dana truly didn't know much about him coming in,
Sure.
you could see that showing and be impressed enough by by how exciting the fight was to maybe give him a shot. I'm actually not going to fault Dana too much for the 5 for 5 this week, if I'm being
Yeah,
honest.
I'm in the same boat there.
Are you in the same boat because I said it?
Oh no,
So
I
were
was
you
not
on board?
surprised one bit that he got a
Well, I
contract.
wasn't surprised. I feel like nobody should be surprised, especially after last week. But I do feel like people are probably still going to be like, I think he's the one that's definitely going to get the ire of
Yeah,
the majority of the fans. And I know last week we had a couple complaints about contracts being given out. So just I'm trying to keep you on your toes, Dom. I'm like,
mhm,
I want to be unpredictable. I want to.
of
Oh,
course.
you think I'm gonna bitch about someone getting a contract? Boom, crossover, Euro step, hit you with that. Actually, I'm not surprised. Lay it up, the finger roll,
Off the glass.
the co-main event, light heavyweight division. What an Adonis this guy is, right? I mean, what a specimen.
Yeah.
Don't you just love talking about half naked men like this? It's just great stuff. Ibo Aslan.
Mm,
I almost said Asian, but that is an L, not an I.
correct. Yeah.
Ibo Aslan gets the first round, 2-minute, 22-second TKO over Paulo Renato Jr. I immediately recognized this name. He fought last season on the Contender Series. And they, of course, said this on the broadcast. He actually fought at heavyweight against Jamal Pogues. And I remember that fight because Jamal Pogues was one of the guys who I had a very hard time with because he got the contract. And I was like, I don't see how you give him a contract. But then you see how emotional and his story. And you're like, okay, maybe I would give him a contract. I'm too much of a softie at heart. So so crazy that Renato Jr. fought at heavyweight. And kind of crazy that he's fighting at light heavyweight because talk about a size mismatch. I mean, Renato Jr. looked like he could fight at middleweight.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the ceiling's going to be for a guy like Aslan, but he throws hammers, and hammers, they hit.
Hammers, they hit. I mean, the dude's never went the distance in 13 fights. All 12 of his wins are by knockout. What I liked here was that he played a very patient game, but then when the opportunity was there, it was over. He said, I have the Turkish hammer. You know, we have the Polish power at light heavyweight, and now we have the Turkish hammer here with Ibo. So it was quite a nasty knockout. I like light heavyweight getting someone fresh, someone new.
Oh, I do too, and I do think the actual size of this guy, the look of this guy, kind of gets me like, okay, I'm excited to see what's next for him. Again, I'm really just admiring this guy's physique here. Just
how can you not, right?
I guess I guess that's what we do here. But you know, again, it's hard to put too many nitpicks on a 2-minute and 22-second knockout. I will just say, didn't see a lot of head movement. Just gonna throw that out there.
Be on the lookout. Right. Okay.
Just something that might be worth noting as he takes on guys maybe more up to his size, carry more of a punch. You know, if he finds himself in the kind of exchanges he did here, he could get caught clean, and that could be it. I mean, that's all I'm going to say. But overall, I mean, you can't 10 out of 10 performance. I mean, what can you say?
Right? Yeah.
Main event. Dominic. So this was the biggest fight on the card, obviously. A lot of people were surprised, and some even upset that the current Cage Warriors lightweight champion, George Hardwick, was being forced to go through the Contender Series. They said, no, sir, this man needs to be given the expressway directly into the UFC. So in here, he's taking on Abdul-Kareem Al-Sawedy. See, that's the name I thought would be the hardest, and then it just rolls off the tongue.
Came out the easiest.
Yeah. So he was taking on him, a pretty solid wrestle boxer on the circuit. And, Dominic Abdul ends up getting a unanimous decision win here. Honestly, he was the biggest underdog by far. I think he was like a plus 370 or something.
Yep.
Didn't look it at all in this fight.
He looked great.
He was in control from start to finish, basically, here. What did you make of this? What did you think of kind of the hoopla going into George Hardwick, and now the fact that he's lost? What does this really mean for all that? Just give me kind of your thoughts on the whole thing.
It is interesting that a guy that's an accredited promotion like Cage Warriors and is a champion there was put on Contender when we see plenty of Cage Warriors champions just come right over in. I mean, Patty's one of them. Molly McCann's another one. Ian Gary didn't have to go on the Contender. There's people like that didn't have to go through this show, but George did. And I don't know if they were maybe left with something to be desired through his Cage Warriors fights, and they thought this was the best way to kind of bring him through. But here he is. He comes onto your show, and not only does he lose, he convincingly loses in his own game by a guy that's not known as a striker in Al-Sawedy. So a bit of an eye-opening performance, I would imagine, for George and a lot of his supporters. Probably just goes back to Cage Warriors, fights a couple more times. And will we see him in the UFC? It's likely. The guy's 26 years old. He's 12-2. He's a good talent. Maybe just a little bit too much too soon. And Al-Sawedy, that guy's post-fight interview just made me want to run through a brick wall. And then Dana's post-fight interview about his post-fight interview made me want to run through a concrete wall. It was just quite an interesting dynamic to close out the show. But it was awesome. It was amazing
a lot of walls,
to see.
Dom.
A lot of walls. They'd probably just blast me backward. And this is the guy with the most experience on the card. He's 15-3 now. He's been there and he fought his way to this opportunity, and now he's in the UFC. Those are the stories why we love Tuesday nights.
Exactly. You really took the words out of my mouth there. A tough loss for George Hardwick. A bit of hindsight's 2020, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
maybe he still should have been brought in without having to go through this. But then you see a guy like Abdul-Kareem Al-Sawedy, who was a huge underdog, kind of shine by, beating him. And now you could look at a guy like that and go, well, maybe he was too good to be, because this was a very high level fight. You could just tell. You
Yes,
could
it
tell the
was.
difference
It was a
between
good
this
fight.
fight and no disrespect, but the 4 fights underneath it. Like, you could
Yeah,
definitely
I
tell
agree.
a increase of level here
Mm-hmm.
was had. And Al Sawady's got a style that is a bitch to deal with, that wrestle boxing
Mm-hmm.
combination. But the best of the best typically are able to find ways to counteract it.
Mm-hmm.
So that'll be something to see as he advances along. Obviously, he's still starting at the bottom here, but a great step taking on that Cage Warriors champion. That's obviously going to be a huge feather in the cap as he goes to make his debut in the
Mm-hmm.
UFC. And I'll just say, like, I understand that Cage Warriors has this reputation, but Dominic, I'm not exactly like, just because someone's a Cage Warriors champion, I don't know if it's has that shine that it used to for me of like,
Sure.
oh, this is a no doubt prospect. I
Mm-hmm.
think you are seeing some. I mean, obviously, Patty still has a chance to do something. I'm not discounting him, but Molly McCann's sort of been whatever. Like, I mean,
Jake
it's
Hadley.
it's yeah, Jake Hadley. I believe he wasn't a champion when he was in the UFC. Reese McKee might be due for another look. He's a
Uh, yeah. Yeah.
we liked him, but he
Poor
obviously was
guy got
fed to the
fed to
wolves.
Hamzat.
Yeah, but I don't believe he was the Cage Warriors champion when that happened, but I
Yeah.
think he has since moved along to that. But like, if he was able to come back and go through, he actually would have been a great guy to put on the Ultimate Fighter
Yeah.
if you're doing the whole
Yeah.
prospects versus veterans thing.
True.
Whatever.
Maybe next year.
Hindsight's 2020.
Yeah.
Dominic, as we did last week, though, it's time for the ranking.
Mm.
Who's in, who's out? I'm going to put a little interesting spin on this one because I think we're both in agreement that we would have given 4 out of 5 contracts.
Yep. Yep.
So I want you to make your list, not based off of necessarily the showings that we got tonight, at least not completely, but I want you to do it as if you only had 3 contracts to give out.
Oh.
So
Okay.
basically, whoever's number 4 here isn't getting a contract. So that might make you have to strategize a little bit. Do you go up strictly off of who had the best night or who you think has the most potential moving forward?
I think based off of my power ranking list, I still will keep my top 3 the same. I think I will.
Okay.
I had Eduarda 1, definitely in. I had Ibo 2 in, and number 3 was Charalampos at number 3.
Okay.
So that would leave Abdul-Kareem out and Hyder out.
Wow.
Okay, I see what you did there. That was okay.
Okay. So my number 1's actually Al-Sawedy.
Okay.
Now this is a little bit more not necessarily. I mean, the performance was great, but hard to compare to the highlight reel,
Mm-hmm.
finishes we were seeing.
Right.
I just think he's the best prospect that got a contract here. I think that's
Mm-hmm.
number 2, though, and this is pretty close to number 1. Eduarda Moura is who I would put there. Number 3, I would go with Charalampos. So I would leave out
Mm.
Ibo Aslan. I can't, when you're splitting hairs between those 3, I said something about the head movement. Bam.
Yeah.
that's
There you go.
enough. And then Hyder Amil, obviously, number 5 there. So,
Okay.
yeah, that would be my ranking. And we want to open it up to you guys. But before we
Mm-hmm.
do, actually, Dominic, I did want to let you know something about tonight. I made for the first time in my life a bet on the Contender Series. Have you ever bet on Contender Series before?
All the apps I have will not allow me. Shout out to Ohio.
Well, why was I allowed to bet on it tonight?
I do not know. Maybe I should have checked again before the card started.
It
Last
was
week
show-
I
well,
wasn't.
last week it was showing for me too.
It shows for me, but it won't let me do anything with it.
Oh, interesting.
Do with that what you will.
Well, I was able to bet on it. Me and Dominic live in the same state, in case you can't tell by this.
Yeah.
I ended up right before the fight. I took Ibo Aslan to win via KO TKO at plus 110. Put
Oh,
2 units on that bitch.
Hell
Cashed
yeah.
in 2 minutes. I was like, man,
That's a
I
fun
said,
Tuesday
I
night.
said, man, Yanni, get the hell out of here. I don't even know what his bets were for this.
He had a
but
tough
man,
one last week. This week he had a good week, I heard.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, I'm happy for him because I have been in his spot and I hate that. It's fun, it's funny, but also it's like there's nothing worse if you're a gambler and you're struggling to have the whole world saying fade the Greek.
Yeah, it's
Man,
tough.
Tough to have people dancing, praying for your downfall.
Exactly.
So yeah, we do want to ask you guys though to comment below. Let us know who you would give your contracts to if you could only give 3. I'm going to put the same on you guys. So if you could only give 3, who you giving, who's out, and also like and subscribe, of course, if you want to see more content like this. We will be back this time next week for week 3. See you.